This video is for question 9 about buttons. What this question focuses on is the text feature that we are given at the end of the article that compares building a suspension to a spider weaving a web. According to the information, and consider this, when does a spider construct most of its web? When the wind, before attaching a thread to a surface, after reinforcing the first thread, and when the wind stops blowing the threads. So because of this question, I'm really forced to go back into this text feature and try to understand it. I'll be completely honest with you guys, when this article and I saw this little diagram text feature, I was sort of like, okay, all right, building a suspension is like a spider weaving a web. And I didn't really go and read this very deeply until I saw, okay, there's a question about it. I really need to understand this. So after looking at it, we're giving the 3 steps about the spider throwing across this first thread, waiting to finally reinforce it and build the web. So that's essentially comparing it to, oh, remember the kite? It's sort of like when we throw, or I'm sorry, not we the spiders, throw our thread across. So when does it construct most of its web? So that was at the end here when when it's strong enough, we can start to add more threads to it to make our web. So when the first thread is blown by the wind. So that was this first step here. A single thread blown by the wind from one surface to another. I'm going to get rid of that answer choice because we can't construct the web until 3. And so there's a lot of things that happen in between step 1 and 3. So I'm going to get rid of that. Was just one of the very first steps. Before attaching a thread to a surface. Doesn't make sense at all, because how can you make your web before you even have anything? Like, this is like a step 1. So nothing happens before. You wouldn't make the web before you start. So that one is kind of the one that doesn't make any sense at all. After reinforcing the first thread. Reinforcing is making it stronger. If that was an unfamiliar word to you, of course you would want to look that up. But here we have strengthen it little by little, making that comparison between the suspension bridge and the spider web. Similarly, a spider adds more threads to make its first line strong, reinforcing it, making that strong, and then we can the web. So that's within the same sentence. So that makes sense. It constructs most of the web after reinforcing that first thread. So I like that one. Then the last one is when the wind stops blowing the threads. The only time that wind is mentioned is, again, in that very first step. Whole rest of the process is not dependent upon the wind. It's not like the spider is sitting there like watching, the barometer, trying to figure out when it's going to be the best time to complete the web. So that one's going to be wrong. You might look at that one and say like, oh yeah, that makes sense because we need to wait for it to be stable enough. But what's really important is making sure that those first threads are very strong. So the answer choice is C.